Welcome to the Amplify to Seven Figures podcast, where we look inside the mind of seven-figure entrepreneurs to see how they amplify their business and amplify their life. Let's welcome today's guest. Welcome to the Amplify to Seven Figures podcast. Today's guest has started or helped to grow several companies from startup to 7 and 8 figures in revenue. In 2019, one of his outsourcing companies made it onto the Inc. 2500 list hitting over $17.5 million in revenue. He's featured on ABC's Extreme Makeover Weight Loss Edition, and he went from 540 pounds to losing over 255 pounds in a single year. Please welcome to the show, Mike Gianullis. Welcome to the Amplify to Seven Figures podcast. And please give a very warm welcome to today's guest, Mike Gianullis. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, doing good. Thanks for that great intro. It's awesome.
Hey, awesome stuff. So listen, Mike, you hear a lot of this stuff right now about like this hustle and grinding. You've got to get up at 3 a.m. and all that kind of stuff. Personally, I'm not a fan of that mentality. But what makes you feel that this motivation is a myth and goals don't work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, firstly, I'm with you. I'm not the guy that wants to work all. Well, it's kind of weird. So yeah, I don't think that we should glorify hustle culture. I don't think that that's what we're here for on earth. I think it's one part of it. But I think that there are people. I will say that I work way more than the average person, but it's never been because I have to do it, or I'm not like, I don't force myself to. It's actually what I like. It's what I enjoy. And so I think a lot of people that don't enjoy that stuff, they feel like they have to, and that ends up, and then you just end up tiring yourself out. But when I talk about motivation being a myth and goals don't work, what I mean by that is actually this idea that, well, motivation is a very, very temporary thing. If you think about it, all it is an emotion, is a feeling. And when you put motivation in between you and whatever outcome you want, you're basically saying, do I feel like doing it? And all that is going to do is give you a yes, no in your kind of flow. And you can say, no, I don't. So I won't do anything. So the truth of it is, it's just an out. And I'm not saying it's easy. It sucks. If you don't feel like it, it's hard, but it's doing it when it's hard. That's when you get the outcomes that you want. Now, this is not for everyone. I am convinced more than ever that most people should not be in business. They should just get a job, save, invest, do it yourself. Like that. I think there's a certain type, but let's go on, because this is the big one. And I still haven't yet quantified the idea. It's in my mind. I haven't got it expressed in just the right way. I would love to write a book on this if I ever get the chance. But the idea that goals don't work, that's weird for me to say, because I'm very goal driven and I've done a lot of cool things. I've built 7-figure companies, an 8-figure company. I've lost over 300 pounds. I've done some pretty crazy things. But what I realized is the mistake that we make is in calling it a goal. So a goal is sort of the end point where that's where we want to get to, right? But what I found out is all the successes that I've had have not come from setting goals, but from creating projects. And that's the difference. When you take a project mentality and you apply it to what we call goal setting, that's when change can really occur. Because if you think about it, if you say, I have a goal, my goal is I want to paint this wall. Okay, great. When are you going to do it, right? The whole idea is you got to create a plan. Well, if you actually say, instead of having a goal, which the goal could be, yeah, someday I'm going to paint that wall. That's my goal and I'll get there, right? But if you turn it into a project, your mind forces you, because we understand projects and they're more tangible. Goals are not very tangible, right? They're very esoteric. They're very kind of in the wind and they're out there and we're just like, hey, we'll go do it. But But when you think about a project, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to paint this wall. So I need to go buy paintbrushes. I need to choose a paint color. I need to ask my friends if they want to come over to give me a hand. I've got to prep it. I've got to do this. I have to do that. We start to create a pathway, and we don't let problems get in the way. So we say we go to a store, they don't have the paint that we want. We don't go, oh, that's it, I can't paint this thing anymore. No, we say, let's go to this store, let's try that store. So we create what are, in essence, backup plans or different strategies to overcome obstacles that get in the way. When we set goals, we tend to ignore obstacles because we're being fed the motivation myth, right? Just, you can do it, you can go. But then if you create a project, then you've already planned for it. You've already thought it through. You've already said, if this happens, I'm going to do this. If this happens, I'm going to do that. You also, what are some of the big things? Timelines, deadlines. Sometimes I like to say a goal is truly just a headline with a deadline, right? If you want to kind of shift the way you think about it. And a goal is nothing more. It should be a project for a to-do list. And that's the way that I'd like to reframe it. It's not a massive change, but I think it just helps some people. When it's one of those things, if it makes sense to you, you're like, wow, genius, and if not, you're like, yeah, that's so obvious. But for me, it was a big deal. I don't know why, but when I first had that thought, I was like, that makes total sense. It's about creating projects. And sure, a goal can be part of the project, but that's kind of why I shifted the way that I do things, and I put projects above goals. So that way the goal comes within.
Are we talking almost like milestones, right? Rather than end goals. It's like, okay, well, what are all the milestones on the way that I need to do in order to achieve that goal?
Yeah, exactly. So we need goals because goals do point us where we want to go. The other thing too, and this is where projects come into play, especially if you've ever studied agile, lean, the whole like sprints and those kind of things, that whole type of project management. You'll find that a lot of times, and this is true for all of us, we don't really know what we want. We think we do. The odds that 10 years ago were like, hey, I'm going to be a podcast host, were probably very slim. Maybe you did it, but it's quite rare. We meander towards where we're trying to go, and we're getting feedback constantly, and that feedback modifies what we want and what we think we want and what we actually go do. So many times people set goals and they'll basically destroy themselves to achieve a goal that they set 5 years ago that doesn't even make any sense anymore. Right. So that's also where I think you've got to get to the point where you're more free and you're more able to shift, because the world changes, especially now, the world changes so fast. Right. So there's things like, I brought this up a few weeks ago, like if you were making a social media plan, like a 5-year social media plan, say 2 or 3 years ago, you wouldn't even have thought about TikTok. You wouldn't even known about it. Right. So, you can't even truly create things that far out. So that's why I think it's all about kind of short projects with, like you said, with timelines, with deadlines, with milestones, and don't be afraid to shift and modify where you're at based on the feedback of marketplace, of yourself, of your audience, of just how you feel, even like that's okay. And I think I preach this so hard because I naturally get stuck in that kind of way. If I write something down, I'm like, it has to happen, and that's a good way to drive yourself, but it's also a good way to drive yourself crazy because you can end up, pursuing something that you probably should have let go of. So that's why I like now to do like a quarterly type check-in and say, is this truly, where I want to be still?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, some suggested reading for people listening to that is things like the 12-week year and things like that, so just compress those things down, and it's amazing what you can achieve in such a short. I mean, even when we launched this podcast, we're like, we need to do a giveaway, to get some momentum out the gate. And I could have spent months and months planning it, and I did it 2 weeks out. But we compressed all that down. I wrote down every single step of the project, and then went, right, either allocate it out to the rest of the team, or what do I need to do? And then we made sure that moved through. So I 100% agree with you on the sprints and the milestones.
Yeah.
So moving on, Mike, as well, around a lot of people, there's this old saying, right? 70 cents of the dollar is spent on advertising in the headline, on a site. So headlines are massively important. How do you write fire headlines that really work?
Great question. So yeah, and actually the old quote is from David Ogilvy, and he claims that it's up to 80% actually, which is even more. So what I teach people quite a bit is FIRE is for me an acronym. What I'm really big into that. I like to come up with really cool acronyms. And so I teach kind of 4 different types of headlines just to make sure people understand. Headline is sort of the top part of your sales page, your lander. It's the thing that should grab some attention and should get people to keep reading or to engage. This could also be part of your ad. If it's like a Facebook ad, there's a spot for your headline. Most ads have something at the top. And basically what's kind of read first tends to be the headline. So FIRE is an acronym, and this kind of gives the 4 different types of and again, I don't want to say that these are like hard and fast always, but these are 4 that this work. And these headlines are, the F stands for fear. And I hate that one because I hate fear. I'm not a fear guy, but unfortunately they do convert. And when I say fear, I don't mean like fake stuff. I don't mean trying to scare people off, but it just means pointing out some kind of a negative consequence if they don't take some kind of an action. You'll see this used a lot in like stock type companies, like, is your portfolio about to crash, right? The coming market crash of 2021, right? Everyone's like, oh, there's a little bit of fear there. Now, it only makes sense because we look around and we see all these things that are going on, and we're like, hey, what do they know that I don't know? And so they can also be, 3 signs that you're headed for a heart attack. Well, if you're in that kind of age or that kind of feeling, you're probably going to want to check that out, right? So that's where the fear side comes in. I try to stay off of that because it's just not my thing, but it does actually work. Now we go on to the I, and the I is what I like more. That's inspire. So it's kind of the opposite, right? So the fear angle is what you want to gravitate away from. The inspire is what you want to move towards. And this is more of your benefits and what's in it for them. So instead of saying, 3 signs of a heart attack, it would be 3 foods you should eat to unclog your arteries, right? So there's a benefit there. And now you'll want to perhaps read more of that and what are these 3 foods. And you could even, if you want to do the whole clickbait thing, it would be like, number 3 will shock you, and then you're like, oh man, what is, it's a banana, what, whatever, right? So there's that kind of weird angle. So this is your more traditional headline angle where you want to give a benefit. You want to say why they should read, what's in it for them. And then the R stands for relate. And this is where I have to tell people, this is a great way to tell a story, to connect with the people. So, and this story can be about you, it could be about a client, it could be about a customer, it could be some other story that you read. Big key is it should be a true story. I don't like the people that make stuff up. I also think that's a very good way to be. But stories really, really pull people in. People love stories. And if you're in a competitive niche or industry, about the only way you can truly stand out is stories. Because say you're selling some weight loss pill, right? Everyone's saying it'll burn the fat, it'll happen fast, you'll lose 20 pounds and so fast, and it's like, okay, but not everyone can tell your story. Not everyone can tell your client story. That's unique. So if you open up with a story, it could be something like how one man shed 30 pounds of visceral fat in 3 months with this one proven strategy. Whatever. Now you want to know, who is this one man? What's the strategy? How did he pull it off? Of course, you should also say results not typical, of course, but so that is like the story angle. And then finally, the final stat, or the final one is E, and the E stands for educate. So this is where you're going to actually present yourself more like you're sharing information or knowledge. And these work extremely well with stats. So this would be going back to the weight loss example. Are you in, and I'm just making these up, so don't think they're true, but are you in the 10% of men who suffer from this problem? Whatever, right? So you can be more exact, but if you can throw out a stat, and those stats really help out a lot. And it could be something, it doesn't even have to be a stat, but it could also be like a teaching, like 7 signs of this or 10 ways of this. And those kind of things, again, because we always want knowledge, right? So we're going to be pulled in to learn that thing. And then the final kind of trick to the whole thing is, if you want to amplify your results, you can combine them. So you can use a little bit of fear with a stat, which is what I kind of did. There 7 foods you should never eat because they cause cancer or whatever, right? Now you're kind of doing both of those. So that is sort of the way that I think about it. I try to think, what is my headline angle going to be? And then I write from that step. And the cool part is, once you have that, it sort of helps you to write the whole thing. Because now you kind of have your angle, you kind of have, and you kind of follow up with that. So that's a long way to say it, but that's what I do.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is we also try and do the stats part of it, and we'll go with more specific numbers, right? So it'll be like 99.3% of people should avoid these 7 foods.
Yeah, exactly.
And then people are like, oh yeah, that's like, they relate to it more because it's like, oh, that seems like it's backed off data, as opposed to like I don't know, 50% of people or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. Real stats that are exact work out way more than anything else. And that's one more thing that I think I'll add is the idea being that you want to present your information in a way that's also entertaining, or at the very least interesting, which brings me to curiosity. So curiosity is probably the greatest invention that God ever made for being able to sell stuff, because curiosity is what pulls people in, right? That's what gets them to, follow up, to read. So you want to use curiosity any chance you possibly can. You can even see in most of the examples that I gave and the one that you gave, there was this curiosity angle, like, what is it? What's the food? What's this? Right? And so that is sort of, if I could circle the word fire with a big C, the C would be to keep it curiosity based.
And there's a phrase that my mentor says to me over and over and over again, based around that curiosity, which is the buyer journey. Someone is thinking, there's something that I want that I don't yet have, and I think by clicking this thing or taking this action, it just might help me get it.
Yeah.
And that curiosity piece works really well in that respect.
Really, and yeah,
I love
that's
that.
good. Yeah. And one more thing, just to kind of think about, and this is very interesting, is that you can look at each of those 4, FIRE, and you can actually start to think about it as the one that you use is going to attract different kinds of people. So, your fear-based people are going to be attracted more towards that. So you can also use your audience targeting to help you decide, or you can use all 4 and attract all 4 types. But the inspire people are going to be more driven towards benefits, obviously. And I think a lot of like your friendlier, if you get into the personality stuff, you can also see it there too, where the more compliant people will be more fear-based, the more inspirational people will be the eyes, they'll be inspire. And then you have like the people that are just like friendly and just want to be cool, they'll be more with the stories because they like to understand people. And then you have your sort of like nerdier ones who will want the stat side and the E, so you can use that as well to determine what you should go after.
Yeah, and on that note, have you ever seen like using more fear-based headlines that potentially attract a higher refund rate, because those people act out of fear both ways? So they buy out of fear, but then they refund out of fear as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's why I don't try to do the fear angle that much, because I just feel like it's playing on negative emotions. And I think that I would only think it's okay if your product truly helps them solve a major problem that if they don't solve, they're going to suffer. you know, so a lot of people with weight issues and things like that, because I've been there, right? So I kind of understand it, and I know that everyone tried to kind of scare me into it. It didn't quite pan out that way, but I did. But I think it was important for me to know that there were consequences, and so I think that sometimes that's what we do with those ads.
And let's talk about that weight loss. So you went from, what was it, 540 pounds?
Yeah, my biggest ever, which is about, what was it, about 10 or 11 years ago. Yeah, I was 540 pounds.
And you lost 255 in 1 year, 255 pounds. So that's,
Yeah,
like, for us English people, with this 14 stone in a pound. So I'm not sure what that works out. Is about 20 stone, something like that.
so, something like that. Yeah, yeah. And then I actually ended up getting down. My current weight right now is around 220. So, you know, I'm over 320 pounds for my highest weight, which is insane, because that's like an obese man, you know, like I lost an obese man. And so, yeah, but yeah, it's quite a story. I could, that could be a whole 3 hour,
Yeah.
you know, thing, but yeah.
Talk to me about how has that affected the kind of businesses that you run now and the way that you run your businesses? Is there a different mentality because you've gone through such a struggle with something else in the past, so you know you got that determination? Or
Yeah, I think that for sure it showed me that I can achieve things that I never thought that I could. And it's also, especially the year, because, you know, I didn't go into it, but I was on a weight loss TV show. And during that year, I had to do so much. I mean, we trained 5 hours per day, 6 days per week. So sometimes it was 6 hours. After the first 3 months, I still had to keep my income up. They didn't pay us anything. So I still had to try to run a company and exercise all the time. It was, you know, we ate all the time. It was like this whole process. And I think through that experience, I really developed a lot of self-discipline, and probably also began to see that I needed to take better care of myself, because I think I worked so much, and that's all I really thought about. And I was not a whole person. I was very much like a one-dimensional worker bot, you know, that was like all that I would, you know, be. So yeah. And then nowadays, because I actually work now in health industry, I have a supplement company and a few other investments that are in that space. And so I think that it sort of gives me an edge in that I don't have to do a ton of research to know the audience, because I was the audience, you know. That part helps, although I still do it. But, you know, it's, I kind of know what they want, and I know all the little small things that you can't really know, like tying your shoes and the whole airplane thing, just being able to fit, you know, all those kind of things. When you've been through it, or, you know, the embarrassment of when you can't fit in a chair, like, all these little weird things, but they're part of it. Or, you know, you walk by and people point at you and kind of snicker, you know, all these kind of things. I've been through that. So when I talk about those things or write about them, it's from a real place of experience.
Yeah, which, like you say, is highly beneficial in marketing in general. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been to theme parks with people that are larger, and like they're trying to get into the roller coaster, and that you've got two guys pushing a harness down, just trying to get
Like jumping on it, pushing. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're just like, oh, this is really, really awkward. And
Yeah, it's cringy.
Yeah, totally relate to that. So, Mike, one question that we ask everyone on the show, and I'm really intrigued to hear your answer, especially seeing as, you know, you've gone through such a journey yourself, is what do you want to be remembered for when you die?
That's a good question. I think this is something I've worked on some. I actually wrote an obituary as part of a goal setting thing that I did. So obviously, first and foremost, I want to be known as a great spouse, son, brother, you know, that whole thing, you know, family. It's probably my top thing, that they think that I was there for them, and I helped them all to achieve whatever goals they had. I think professionally, I would like to be known as someone who made a difference and helped make the business world a little bit easier for people to understand. I think there's a lot of complexities that don't have to be, and you have to, but I think you need people who can dive in and sort of teach or repackage principles in a more down-to-earth way. And then I think finally, I think from like an inspirational standpoint, I just want to serve as someone that showed people that no matter how many times you get knocked down, you can get up again and you can keep at it and you can keep fighting. And so I think that would be kind of cool.
That's super powerful. You know, a lot of people who have on their show have got different reasons for that. Some is just want to support the family and that's it. And some people have got that wider audience. So I can really see where yours comes from as well, you know, with everything like the journey you've been on. So yeah, phenomenal stuff there. So what is one quick win that people can use to amplify their business today, Mike?
Man, it depends on so many things, but I guess I'll try to come up with something at least broad. I think that most people, if they don't, you know, pursue some sort of a paid acquisition strategy, whether so, you know, because I know a lot of people that have sort of like especially the offline people, they'll have like a referral based thing where, you know, they'll brag to me about, I haven't run an ad in 10 years. And that always to me is like terrifying, you know? So I do think that most people, if, you know, should have some kind of a system set up to generate leads, whether, you know, especially if they can do it through YouTube, Google, Facebook, any of the other upcoming platforms, wherever your audience is. I think that you should have some sort of a paid acquisition strategy because that can scale. And that also increases the value of your company. So if you've been thinking about it, I would say go do it. It's going to take time. It's going to suck. It's going to be painful, but you'll figure it out if you keep at it.
Worth it in the end. Said it would be, there's a quote, I think, from the Great Marigold Hotel film or something, is that it'll be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end.
Huh, I like that.
So, Mike, firstly, it's been fantastic having you on the show. And what seven-figure entrepreneur would you nominate to be on the show next?
I probably would actually nominate one of my business partners.
Oh, fantastic.
Mike Williams.
Mike Williams, cool.
Yeah.
Let's get that. We'll write that down as well. And
he's big into finance and operations, and has a great background. He used to work for some really big companies as a COO. So pretty cool stuff.
Fantastic, Mike. And where can people find out more about you?
So for me, I have two sites. If you want to learn more about how to write copy, I would say go to copywriterbrain.com. I have a workshop that I give away where I kind of teach them some pretty cool strategies on how to build what I call a copywriter brain. So that's copywriterbrain.com. And my blog, which has been online since 2006, which is insane now, it's onlyonemike.com. There's a bunch of articles there. Some stuff it's got everything I've ever thought of since 2006. So some of it's a little bit weird.
But yeah, that's fantastic. So make sure you go to copywriterbrain.com and certainly check that stuff out. That's fantastic. Mike, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. And you've been listening to the Amplify to Seven Figures podcast with me, Paul Ace, and my amazing guest, Mike Gianullis.
All right.
So remember, guys, amplify your business and amplify your life. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Amplify to Seven Figures podcast. To access the show notes, episodes, and this month's giveaway, head over to www.amplifyto7figures.com. Remember, amplify your business, amplify your life.